My wife and I live in a bigger town in Indiana. I'll keep the city name out of the story for privacy. We have been living in our home in a quiet neighborhood for almost 5 years at the time of this story. It felt safe, secure, and boring. Honestly, just the way I wanted it. However, it wouldn't stay like that forever. My wife had a business trip she needed to go on. She planned on flying to her destination, but her and a few of her coworkers that were going as well decided to meet up at their office to carpool to the airport. They had an early flight, so she had to be at her office at 5:30 the next morning. Not wanting to leave her car at work for the long weekend, she asked if I could drop her off in the morning. I didn't love the idea of getting up so early, but agreed to do it. As we were getting ready for bed, I heard rain. Rain always puts me to sleep quick, so I decided to crack the window open. The next morning came quick, and both of us might have hit the snooze button one too many times. We were now in a rush trying to get the rest of her stuff packed and loaded into the car. As she was getting the last of her stuff together, I went downstairs to let our dogs outside. We have 3 dogs, a German Shepherd, a Husky, and a Pit Mix. We have a fenced-in backyard, so I opened the back door and all 3 dogs ran outside. As I shut the door, I heard my wife running downstairs yelling that we needed to leave now. I grabbed her car keys and headed out the door. She only worked about 10 minutes away, so I decided to leave the dogs outside. I also didn't bother locking the door since I knew I'd be back soon. About half an hour later, I was already pulling back into the driveway. As I got out of the car, I noticed something strange. Wet footprints leading from the side yard across the driveway and up to the front door. The grass was still wet from the rain, but the pavement had dried. While this did puzzle me, I assumed my wife must have went to the side of the house for some reason before we left. Even though I told myself I was positive it must have been her, I still entered the house cautiously. I immediately checked the living room. Nothing seemed out of place, and the car keys were still on the coffee table. I figured if someone had broken in, they would have clearly seen my car keys and probably stolen my car. While this did make me feel much better, I still thought it'd be best to check the whole house. I let the dogs inside and they acted like their normal, happy selves. I probably spent about 15 minutes checking every room in the house, but came up with nothing. Nothing seemed missing or out of place, so I officially wrote it off as me being paranoid and went about my day. Later that evening, I got a phone call from my wife letting me know she had arrived safely. We chatted for a while, but one of our dogs kept barking downstairs. This wasn't unusual, so I didn't pay too much attention to it. He is the pit bull mix and will literally bark at anything and everything. Ignoring his barks, I continued the conversation with my wife. She brought up how they almost missed their flight and was glad that we hadn't slept in just a little later. This reminded me of the footprints she left. I asked her what she was doing on the side of the house this morning. She seemed confused and started to say something, but at this point I could barely hear her over our dog's continued barking. It was so loud at this point, I needed to go see what it was. I told my wife I'd call her back and went downstairs. I found him in the kitchen, barking at the pantry door. I told him to knock it off and open the back door, figuring he wanted to go outside. As soon as I opened the door, the other 2 dogs ran outside, but our Pit didn't. He stood there, continuing to bark at the pantry door. Assuming he was hungry, I opened the pantry door to get his food. To my horror, a dirty man with a long matted beard was crouched in the corner, gripping one of our kitchen knives. Our eyes locked, and I froze. Even though I was terrified and speechless, I could see him looking back and forth between me and the open door behind me. I knew he was deciding if he should just run or attack me. Then, the man made his decision. Before I could react, he lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. I hit hard and then felt the full weight of this man on top of me. People say your life flashes before your eyes before you die. It's totally true. As I lie there expecting this man to stab me, all I thought of was the things I left unsaid or the things I still wanted to do. However, instead of feeling the knife pierce through my body, I heard something entirely unexpected. I heard a scream. I opened my eyes to see my Pit clamped onto the intruder's hand, shaking it violently. The man was trying to shake him off, but couldn't. This must have caused just enough commotion for my other 2 dogs to take notice. With the back door still open, the other 2 dogs rushed back inside and joined the fight against the man. Overwhelmed, the man dropped the knife, desperately trying to fend off my dogs. I took this opportunity to get back on my feet. I scrambled to the kitchen phone and dialed 911. As I was dialing, I saw that even though this man broke into my house and tried to kill me, my dogs were probably going to seriously injure or maybe even kill him. As soon as I heard the operator talking, I put the phone down and started pulling my dogs off the man while yelling to the operator my address and to send the police. I finally got all 3 of them off and threw them outside. I looked down at the man and knew he wasn't going anywhere. I was torn between if I should help him or let him lay there. I didn't have to wait long, as just a few minutes later, I heard sirens. I let the police inside and an ambulance was there moments later. While the man definitely needed to go to the hospital, he looked overall okay considering how much worse it could have been. I later found out that the man was homeless and that he had seen us leaving that morning. He assumed since my wife and I had luggage, we were leaving town for a while. When I returned home, he hid in the pantry. He must have grabbed the knife at some point, but I'm not sure when that was. I decided not to press charges. I owe my life to my dogs, and I can't imagine what would have happened if they hadn't been there. I can only hope that the man found the help he needed, and I never forgot to lock the door again. When I was 15, one of the scariest moments of my life unfolded on a night when my parents had a work dinner to attend. They left me in charge of my 10-year-old sister, Emily. My sister and I honestly got along really well, and she mostly left me alone, so I didn't mind watching her. Plus, my parents said they wouldn't be back till about midnight, so I knew that meant I could stay up a little later than usual and play video games. My parents told me to make sure I had Emily in bed by no later than 10. I said okay and watched them lock the door behind them. After I heard the car pull out of the driveway, I headed to Emily's room. I saw her watching some cartoon. I honestly can't even remember what it was. She was engrossed in her show, so I decided to not bother her and I headed to my room. I sat down in my gaming chair and turned on my Xbox. I don't remember how long I was playing, but I remember hearing Emily come into my room. I looked over at her and she had this uneasy look on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and she responded by telling me there was a man at her window. I almost dropped my controller in horror. I asked her if she was sure, and she shook her head yes. I told her to wait there and I would go look. I slowly walked down the short hallway to my sister's room, trembling with every step. When I reached her door, I poked my head around the corner and looked at the window. I saw nothing. Nobody was there. Breathing a slight sigh of relief, I walked over to the window and looked outside. Once again, I saw nothing. Emily's window looked out into the backyard. It was a decent-sized backyard, and it was hard to see the whole yard from her window. I decided to head to the kitchen and look out the patio door. When I got there, I turned the light on to the back porch. I looked out and saw nothing. At this point, I felt completely relieved. I assumed that my sister either was just making things up or she was just getting tired. I pulled up my phone and looked at the time. It was a little after 10:30. This helped confirm to me that she was just really tired, as she usually goes to bed much earlier than 10:30. I went back to my room and found Emily sitting in my chair. I told her there was nothing to worry about and there was no man there. I led her back to the bedroom and told her it was time for bed. I could really tell that she was scared. Wanting to be a brave big brother, I told her if that man came back to come get me and I would beat him up. This made her smile. She then asked if I would leave her door open and the hallway light on. I told her that I would. She rolled over towards the wall and I got up and went back to my room. I decided I was done with games after all the excitement and would just lay in bed on my phone. It was almost 10 minutes later, and I looked up from my phone to see Emily standing at my door again. "The man is back," she told me, her voice shaky. She then said, "And he wants me to open the window." This absolutely terrified me, but I wanted to seem strong for her and I still wasn't convinced that she was actually seeing anything. I got out of bed and told her I would go take a look. Emily followed me to her room, and I flipped down the light switch and once again saw nothing at the window. I peeked out of it, and it was the same as it was before. Nothing. I looked over at her and said she just must have had a bad dream. She was insisting that she really saw a man. I could tell she was scared, and no matter what was actually going on, I wanted to make her feel better. I told her I would sit in the corner across from the window, and if he came back, I would see him and I would yell at him and make him go away. She seemed to accept this plan as she nodded and turned over again towards the wall to go back to sleep. I walked over to the light switch and flipped it off. I then sunk into the corner and decided to honor my deal with Emily and wait to see if this man showed back up. I waited there for a few moments in silence. I looked down at my phone and saw it was 11:30. Figuring my parents would be home soon and that Emily had probably fallen back asleep, I stood up to head back to my room. However, right before I got up, I thought I heard a noise from outside. I stopped for a second and stared out the window. To my horror, I saw the face of a man slowly peering up from the bottom of the window. He was staring right at Emily. I was absolutely frozen. I'm guessing he must not have seen me as he started lightly tapping on the window. At this point is where I screamed. I honestly don't know who was more scared at that moment. Me seeing the strange man at my sister's window, or that strange man seeing me in the bedroom. Still screaming, I ran over to my sister and pulled her out of bed. I was practically dragging her out of her room. I didn't even look back at the window to see if he was still there. I ran into the bathroom with my sister and locked the door behind us. I called my parents, who were already in the neighborhood. I tried to tell them what had just happened, but I think I was in shock. My parents were inside within less than a minute. After finally being able to explain to them what had happened, my dad immediately ran into the backyard to try to find the guy, while my mom stayed inside with us and called the police. The police searched the neighborhood, but never found anyone. I honestly couldn't even give a good description, as it was so dark and my brain just seemed to shut down. My sister and I were really traumatized by this event. We refused to stay home alone after this. Even to this day, both my sister and I are grown and we don't talk about it. We never saw the guy again, and I really hope that he never does that to anyone else. Who knows what would have happened if my sister would have opened the window, or if the doors hadn't been locked. It was my junior year of college. I had spent my first 2 years in the dorms. Two of my closest friends, who I graduated high school with and attended the same college, decided to rent a house together just off campus. This gave us so much more freedom and privacy. We all agreed it was a great decision. Everything was going well until a few months after moving in. Our football team had just won a home game and everyone was going out to celebrate. Our college took our football team very seriously, so we knew it was going to be crowded on campus this evening. The game had ended around 4 p.m. We knew it was a little early to head to the bars now, so we went back home to shower and get ready. From there, the three of us went to our favorite restaurant and got some food. After all of this, it was a little after 9 p.m., so we Ubered our way to our favorite bar. We met up with a group of friends, and then the drinks started flowing. We were all dancing and having a great time. I only had a few drinks, but I was a lightweight and I was feeling pretty tipsy. I felt like I needed to sit down, so I spotted an open table and made my way over to it. That's when he approached me. This random guy I had never met before just sat down at my table. He didn't look old, but he definitely was too old to be a college student. If I was to guess, I would have said he was in his mid-30s. He instantly struck up small talk, asking if I went to school there, how old I was, and other personal questions. Trying to be polite, I answered briefly, all the while scanning the crowd for a familiar face to come rescue me. When he offered to buy me a drink, I politely declined. Something about this guy sent up huge red flags. I couldn't figure out what it was at the time, but I knew I needed to get away from him. I told him I needed to use the restroom and got up quickly, and I didn't make eye contact. He didn't say anything as I walked away. I tried my best to blend into the crowd, hoping to lose him. Then I ran into Jess, one of my roommates. I told her about the guy and how uncomfortable he made me feel. She just laughed, saying that we should have taken him up on his free drink. Jess led me back to the group of friends. I quickly forgot about the creepy guy and started having fun again. It was maybe 20 minutes later I saw him again. He was leaning against a wall, staring at me. I quickly looked away and told my roommate he was back. When I tried to point him out, he was gone. Something in my gut told me that something was terribly wrong with this guy. Practically in tears, I told my roommate I wanted to go home. She tried to convince me to stay and that she would make sure he stayed away from me. After some convincing, she agreed to leave with me as she didn't want me to go home alone. We said goodbye to our friends and requested an Uber. As we waited outside, a car pulled up right in front of us and came to a slow stop. The window rolled down, and it was him, the guy from the bar. He asked if we needed a ride. Jess looked at me, and she could tell by the look on my face that this was him, the guy from the bar. Jess turned back to him and yelled. She told him he needed to leave right now, or she would call the cops. Without saying another word, the man rolled up his window and slowly drove off. I tried to keep my composure, but I just couldn't stop crying. Jess tried to comfort me, but I just felt sick from the vibe this guy was giving off. A few minutes later, our Uber arrived. Once we got home, we went inside and locked all the doors. While I didn't feel completely better, it did feel good to be home. It made me feel a little safer. Jess could tell I was still a little down, so she told me we were going to order a pizza and watch a movie. I smiled and said that would be nice. She then asked if she could invite her boyfriend Josh over. I was not a huge fan of him, however having a guy over would definitely make me feel better in case that creep actually did find out where we lived. It was only about 15 minutes after we ordered the pizza, the doorbell rang. Jess jumped up, mentioning that they were quick tonight. She went around the corner and towards the front door. I stayed on the couch, continuing to watch the movie. Suddenly, I heard Jess scream. I jumped off the couch and ran to Jess. I turned the corner to see Jess's back against the wall, and stepping inside the house was the man from the bar. Terrified, I screamed at him to leave. He said he just wanted to talk to me, to get to know us better, and promised to leave afterwards. He closed the door behind him and started walking towards me. I was frozen in fear. not sure what to do. He was closer to Jess, but he had his eyes on me. Luckily, Jess was quick on her feet. She managed to push off the wall and run into the man, slightly knocking him off balance. Jess grabbed my hand, dragging me to the back of the house. He chased us and we barely made it into the bathroom, slamming the door shut and locking it behind us. The moment we got the door locked, he began violently pounding on it. We were both screaming at him to leave. Jess pulled out her phone and called the police. The man kept kicking the door, saying calmly he just wanted to talk. Jess yelled that the police were on their way, but this didn't stop him from continuously pounding at the door. Suddenly, there was a loud yell from outside the bathroom, and this made the man stop. There was a brief silence, and then we heard another yell. It was Josh, Jess's boyfriend. As I said earlier, I was never the biggest fan of Josh, but I couldn't be more relieved to hear his voice. He shouted at the man to leave. The man didn't respond, at least to what I could hear. The silence was quickly ended by the loud sounds of crashes and bangs. Jess and I looked at each other, knowing Josh and this man were fighting, but not knowing what was really going on. Then, we heard Josh yell for us to run. We didn't think twice. We unlocked the bathroom door and sprinted towards the front of the house. As we ran past the living room, we saw Josh and the man. Josh had the man in a headlock. It looked like Josh definitely had the upper hand. We ran through the front door literally as we heard the police sirens and lights pulling up to our house. We yelled at the police officers that the man was in the house and Josh had him in a headlock. The two police officers sprinted past us and into the house. Another officer came over to check to see if we were okay. Minutes later, more police cars surrounded the house. Eventually, we saw two officers bringing the man out in handcuffs. They escorted him to one of the police cars, and he just stared at me. My heart sunk. It was a look of pure evil. I honestly don't know what would have happened to me if Jess hadn't come home with me, and if Josh hadn't shown up just in time. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life.